I'm Eric Arneson. I'm going to help you bring your landscapes to life. So now that we've completely drawn out the plan with the drafting pen, you're now ready to do the fun part, which is the marker rendering. So how I like to begin is I like to organize my colors in color combinations that I know work well together and blend well together. And I like to start with the elements that are the highest above first, so I don't end up overlaying colors and blending things that won't work well together. So I'm first going to start with, this is a jade add marker. I'm going to make a crescent shape and just do one pass there. And we're going to use chrome green and gonna fill in the mid-tone and also blend over. And then with this is a celery tone. It's a very light, almost yellowish color. I will do this for these 3 trees. So this one, since these trees are overlapping, I'm not gonna completely go through. I'm just gonna do the portion that is at the edge. But for this one, since the angle of the shadow is this way, it can wrap around. Once again, just doing that crescent shape to fit with the contour of the curve of the tree. And then adding the mid-tone, which is the chrome green. So now we have these 3 trees rendered and they look 3-dimensional. And one thing you can do beyond that is to add an even darker tone, a very light edge, just a very small touch of deep evergreen, which is a very dark blue, bluish green. And what that does is kind of replicate the shadow that would be on the side of the tree that would be in shade. And also like to bring in a celery. Some people use a blender in their marker renderings, but I tend to use a color that's the lightest within the group to use the blending, just because it's readily at hand. I don't have to worry about finding a blender, and also blenders get messy when you're using multiple colors, and you might end up contaminating your beautiful green tree with some toxic red or something. So now I'm gonna go and do the shrub line, which is gonna be the same color combination, but without the deep evergreen. So now that I have those all filled in, I'm gonna wanna render in the palm trees. And so this one is gonna be a combination of spruce green, yellow green, goldenrod, and maybe a little bit of blue on the edges. I'm gonna fill in the lightest color first, which is the yellow green. This one I'm just gonna fill in completely. And all I'm trying to do here is add a gradation, which has a nice amount of color and variation and adds depth. So if this was just a flat color, it would read as a flat object. You want something with dimension. All right, so now we're gonna work on some of the understory shrubs around here. And these will just be a combination of 2 colors. I always like, before I start rendering, I like to test my colors to see if it's something that I want, first of all, and if it's gonna work with the colors and if the marker is still active and looks good. So I'm gonna use a light olive and probably the celery. I'm gonna use a light olive as the dark tone. And for the grasses, we're gonna use a warm tone, which is banana. And then fill in the cracks in between, just with something, so it's not just white in between your plants if you have any gaps. And this could be ground cover or mulch, some material in your design. Just wanna make sure everything gets filled in. So now what we have left is, for as far as softscape, is the lawn. And for the lawn, I'm gonna be using an apple green and probably a willow. So this is a very neutral color. I just like to fill it in one direction. We're gonna reinforce that stippling with a darker tone. So we're gonna come through and follow those lines just to add some dimension to this. So now that we have all the softscape put in, we can start by rendering some of the hardscape materials. One of the ones I like to start with is the deck. So we're gonna work with a banana, desert tan, and craft brown. This will be our light tone for the wood deck. We're gonna come through with the desert tan for the mid-tone. You want to work with the grain of the deck, so you want to be working with those lines that you drew for these pieces of wood, going with them. So you want to make the effect of where there's a light spot, right next to it there's a dark spot, so there's a lot of contrast, and this is what makes a drawing more attractive and appealing, is this creation of these contrasts and creating these gradations that oppose each other. So now we have the deck drawn in, and after I do that, I like to add in some wood grain with a fine tipped pen. And I usually do that just by drawing some very faint swoops and arcs, almost as if you're drawing the knots in the wood. It'll add some character and life to the wood beyond just being a rectangle. I like to do this while I'm rendering, because if you did it before, then it would be under the plant material. And these are some of the fine details that you add in last. So that's done. Got the wood all finished. We're gonna work on the concrete. And for this, we're gonna use a cool gray, and then probably a cool gray number 3 for the pool coping, and mixed in with a little bit of cool gray number 4. Once again, just adding some variation makes it feel more three-dimensional. If you try to work with the lines, it helps it look a little bit better instead of just filling it in all at once. These little imperfections around the edges actually make it look quite good. So now what we can do is fill in the pool. This is going to be a combination of the 2 or 3 colors. It's going to be aqua, blue-green, and deep evergreen. What we're going to do is we're going to use the aqua as the fill and then the blue-green as the shadow. Then add the 1 layer of shadow along the edge. We're going to work in the shadow along the edge here. It's going to be deeper on this side because the steps are going down. So this is the shallow part. It's going to be 1 step more. So already you can see that pops the pool right out. We're also going to add a tiny shadow along the top here. Okay, so now that we have the pool drawn in, we can go ahead and do the other hardscape materials like the gravel. For that, we're going to start with the warm gray. All right, so now that we have all of it colored in, I like to go through and add some more thickness to some of the line weights that aren't quite popping. Like some of the trees, they could use a bit more thickness. So I like to go back through with a sign pen for some of the larger trees like this one. I'm just gonna pretty much double that line weight to really help it pop off the page. I'm just going through and tracing over that first line I did. And also continue with these small shrubs around the edge. And then one last boost for the palm tree. I'm not gonna work on the inside fronds, just the exact perimeter or outside of the plant, the outline of it. And one other thing that we could do beyond that is to add some highlight tones. And what I like to use for that is a jelly roll. For the pool, I'm just gonna create these sweeping forms. So you can see that adds a nice effect as if it's ripples in the water. There's wind blowing over, add some movement and character. For some of the trees, you can add a little bit of a highlight along the perimeter of the tree, just to pop it off page a little bit more. And also this is a nice technique to apply to the wood grain, to add some highlights beyond just that light yellow. And then now, for the most fun part, which is the application of shadows, you need to be very careful with because it can be very dangerous if you don't do it right. But you want to make sure you stick with the same angle that you've been working with this whole time with the shading. Trace over one of the trees. You could actually insert it under the drawing and then use that as your template to then apply the shadow. So we're going to do that for all of these larger ones so they're somewhat consistent. Just working with that same angle. And for these ones, it's okay to do a freehand shadow, and you want to work in that crevice here just to add a little pop of purple. And the nice thing about purple is that it applies the effect of shadow over any color as long as you're not using other purples in the drawing. And after you've applied the shadow, the plan rendering is mainly complete and you're ready to present to your client with a beautiful landscape design.